Good morning.
Good morning.
It was snowing coming across the mountain this morning, and it's just always exciting to think what's happened since I left, you know, so when I go home and a little bit later, it'll be fun to see what's up there now. I love the snow. I don't like it when it's several inches on the road and you're trying to get home, but I just love the snow. It's such a contrast from growing up in Florida. I remember Joe and I talking one time, and I said, I just love this area because we get 4 distinct seasons. And he said, well, we do too here in Florida. We get basketball, baseball. And I asked my dad one time, I said, you know, driving through the state of Florida is like driving through this giant golf course. You know, it's just flat and green and, you know, and all that. But anyway, there was this minister, this pastor, who was trying to raise money for the building fund. And she said, standing at the podium, she said, if there's anyone that would contribute $1,000 to our building fund, I will allow you to choose any 3 hymns that you like. So a little lady was in the back row, and she stood up, and he says, oh, thank you very much. We'll appreciate the money. Which hymns would you like to choose? And she said, I'll take him. I thought that was really appropriate for us. And so I have to tell you that I have been going through this cathartic type of experience as I've been preparing for this talk, of which I'm not sure I'm going to forgive Angie anytime soon. And so even this morning I was quaking into my boots because it just didn't feel smooth yet. But I sat in my chair in the dark and I just practiced, and I thought, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to share with you my thoughts on it. I want to talk about the dark and the light of forgiveness, because so many of us through the last 15, 20 years have heard a lot about embracing your dark side and how vastly important that is. And if you think about, and many of us are frightened of the dark because it means that maybe that the shame that we feel is true for us is actually the truth. And I remember talking with an Al-Anon sponsor many years ago about that, and I said, you know, I'm afraid to go down there inside of myself and see my shadow side, because I'm afraid that I'm going to discover that I'm the monster my father always told me I was. You little monsters. And she says, you know what you're going to find when you go down in there? And I said, what? She said, you. And it was one of the most pivotal, gentle, loving things that anyone has gifted me with. So as I have been working on this idea of forgiveness, I have had this little kettle on the boil over there on the stove, and I'm like, uh-oh. I had been feeling like I was about ready to bolt and run out of my skin. Something was going on. So I called Sandy the other day and I said, I need for you to work with me. It's right here in my throat. So we did this this gift the other day, and I just have to say how peaceful I am that I let this very, very large issue of forgiveness, I finally let this big piece go. And I feel so grateful that I was able to be gifted this opportunity to research forgiveness so that I could have this gift and share with you today. It's still real new, so I'm not going to share it exactly, but I'm going to share some other things with you. So, but let me share some dark about forgiveness. If you don't have a copy, Kim and I did a class on radical forgiveness last year. By calling tipping. If you do not have one of these in your library, invest the $15 and put it in your library. And if you hit the wall of judgment and misunderstanding about a story you're carrying, about somebody you've got issues with, you can have it in your privacy of your own mind and work on the transformational side of forgiveness. But in this book, he calls ego-driven forgiveness mock forgiveness, which means we stand in righteous attitude about an event that we don't know the whole story about, even though we think we do, which then makes an us and a me and you, which then separates you from your source. And so the payoff is ugly. I have a client I'm going to call Debbie. And this is just a beautiful story. Unfortunately, is her reality. But for our purposes, she's gifting us today with how she chooses to stand in mock forgiveness. And she was in the other day, and I've been working with this woman she's one of my oldest clients, 22 years. And recently she's been telling me about this love-hate relationship she has with her mother. And as she told me the story, and I'm going to really condense it for you so you can get the picture, is that she and her mother, like I said, are in this love-hate relationship. But to give you the backstory, her grandmother was raped and had a child many years ago. So then when she married, her husband would not permit her to have her baby. So in those days, in the 30s and 40s, they had other things on their mind other than her going to a shrink to deal with her grief and her vast loss. And so she had a child by this man who she probably had some issues with, maybe resentment, maybe a feeling of betrayal, don't feel loved because he was not supporting her. You know, you can go there. You know maybe what she was thinking. So when her granddaughter, my client Debbie, was born, there was the missing child. So she put all of this love and healing and everything into this baby. Meanwhile, here's her daughter, who didn't get any of that. Nothing of that. So here's this child, here's this woman who is stuck. And my mother didn't give me any of that. And my mother, blah, 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 blah. But here she's giving it to my daughter. So the resentment then shifts from her mother over to the daughter. So then her daughter grows up and has a daughter. So then the grandmother does the same thing. Here's the pattern repeating itself. She's doting on the granddaughter. So here's the daughter who feels left out in the cold. And they are in this headlock of, well, you abandoned me, da-da-da-da-da. So I talked to her about getting some therapy. I talked to her about radical forgiveness and stuff. So she does go see a therapist. Sadly and perfectly, a very unevolved therapist who suggested that she write a letter and mail it. So the payoff is her mother didn't respond by the letter, but her mother, because now you see the granddaughter who has seen nothing but her grandmother as being a beautiful, loving grandmother, is victimized by her mother by this letter that now is it's in print. And so now the payoff is she's been banished from watching her own grandchildren grow up. And that's the payoff for mock forgiveness. Transitionally, when we choose to see God in all things, it's almost like you're trying to stand on your own throat, with your boot. It's like, how can we cut ourselves off from what God is, except we get caught, we get seduced by what appears to be you and me. Rather than, and it is actually a very evolved step, when we can stand in the face of someone that we have a problem with and say, okay, they are reflecting back to me something that I need to see in me. Do I have the courage to heal myself so that the illusion of lies and the games and all the sick stuff that goes with it will lift, and I can see these people as someone who has damaged themselves. And I have to say, as I was thinking about it this morning, when you're a small child, and I came from a very damaged relationship myself, my parents, that when you're a little tiny kid, you don't get that maybe your mother, who was perhaps molested like my mother was, or my father, who was also molested, is stuck at 5 years old. So when you hit 6 and 7 and 8, you're looking at these really large people who are your parents, and you're more mature than them emotionally. We don't get that stuff. We can take it in and say, it's got to be my fault.